welcome to join in with your comments and questions during the discourse, or you can also ask them or share them at the end. And we really are excited about interactive discussion, inshallah. Last time we had some nice interaction, so inshallah we can continue that. So with that, I turn to Dr. Yamina to lead us in tonight's study.
Thank you, Isra. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. So this is our fourth week into this surah, Surah Alaq, which is Surah 96. And just to recapitulate what we've been through so far, the journey that we took with these ayat so far. First, we were asked to read Iqra. And the first thing we wondered what we're supposed to read and how do we read it. And the guidance comes immediately. We're told Iqra bismi rabbik, read in the name of your Rabb, which means that we're told how to read in the name of our Rabb, not in our name, not in the name of anything else. But what is it that we are supposed to read? When we consider the whole ayah, then we are told Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, read in the name of your sustainer, of your Rabb, who has created. Which means that our Rabb describes himself as the one who creates. And this way, he reveals to us what is to be read, meaning what he creates. Because our attention is attracted to his creation. And then we look around at the creation, looking for a connection with this Rabb that we don't know yet at the beginning. And we are overwhelmed. The creation is so vast. I mean, even if we don't consider time just in space, we cannot possibly encompass it. And the more we contemplate the creation as a whole, the more we try to contemplate the creation as a whole, because it's not obvious, the more we are filled with awe. Awe as at its vastness, its beauty, its complexity, and this vastness and complexity and beauty, they manifest glory. It's glorious, it's awe-inspiring. And we feel in our heart that there must be something, there must be someone behind all this meaningful universe, these meaningful activities, all this huge world. But who is that one? Who is he? How is he related to us, to me? That remains unclear by just looking at the creation in general. And we don't know what to do with it. But just because we've been told to look at it, when we look, if we take that step, the time to look, we are filled with awe. If we just happen to watch the sun rising or the sun setting, for instance, that is awe-inspiring. Then, but who is that one behind? We feel that there is something behind, but who it is, how it's related to us is still unclear. Then the next ayah comes and tells us, we are told, خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ عَلَقٍ, that Rabb, your Rabb, he has created human being out of a clinging clot. Like, really? He has created me? So now there is a more tangible connection with me. Now my attention moves from the vast creation that I could not encompass through my thinking and feeling and everything, to something specific within that creation, something that I can focus on and consider specifically. Now, the object of the reading is my own creation, the creation of human being, the closest thing to us. And even if I'm not sure about the meaning of reading yet, I don't know still what exactly it means, I can still consider my own creation from the very beginning, from a clinging cloth. And there is a surah in the Quran that is called Al-Insan. The whole surah is called the human being. It's Surah 76. And this is how it starts. At this point, this is what came to me, is that surah. استعيذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. هل أتى على الإنسان حين من الدهر لم يكن شيئا مذكورا. Subhanallah. Was there not a period of time when a human being was not yet a thing to speak of? شيئا مذكورا, literally a thing mentioned, or a mentionable thing, something that can be mentioned. Meaning, wasn't there a time that you were not existent at all? You didn't exist. And then it carries on. We're told, إِنَّا خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ نُطْفَةٍ أَمْشَاجٍ نَبْتَلِيهِ فَجَعَلْنَاهُ سَمِيعًا بَصِيرًا إِنَّا هَدَيْنَاهُ السَّبِيلَ إِمَّا شَاكِرًا وَإِمَّا كَفُورًا. Truly, it is we who have created human being out of a drop of mixed fluid, that we might test him, and we made him hearing and seeing. So it was a drop of mixed fluid, and then it became something that is hearing and seeing. Truly, we have guided him to the way, be he grateful or ungrateful. So here you can see that process from a drop of mixed fluid to something that is hearing and seeing, and therefore someone who can be tested, as we saw in Surah Al-Mulk. The test there is also a reference or an indication to our free will. We can choose consciously. So it also is an indication, a sign that we are conscious being. We have consciousness. We understand what we are doing and we make choices. And so the result is we are either grateful or ungrateful. So there are degrees in how much we can follow up the process of our creation. Not everyone can go and study embryology, as we referred to, if you remember. It was not last week, but the week before. But even without lots of information, without deep knowledge of the process of our creation, the average person can still, if the intention is to look around attentively, then we can still see how we are brought into existence as weak and helpless creatures who are unaware of their own limbs. You can see babies, they don't even know that they have their hands and feet belong to them. Then we grow into these conscious, hearing, seeing, thinking beings who can read and write and reflect and understand. Subhanallah. This process, as we have talked about earlier, is a process that manifests, reflects rububiyyah. Someone is bringing us from one point to another. There is a clear development. There is a clear getting better and better and better, higher and higher in abilities and consciousness. Someone, whoever is responsible for that, whoever is sustaining us through those stages, he is رَبُّكَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ. He is the creator. He is the Rabb of this creation. So the point here,
Yamina,
yes.
I wanted to mention something here is you were referring to the idea that we don't have to be experts or scientists to reflect on the creation.
Mm-hmm.
Reminded me of a reference from Imam Nursi, where he says the Quran teaches us how to read the signs in the universe, and because most people are common people, the Quran points out to things that are easily noticeable by everybody. He says it's like somebody to show somebody that's new to reading, big letters, big words, words written legibly. And so, our creation, our own creation, is one of those big signs that it's difficult to miss for anybody, regardless of they are even literate or literate, doesn't matter. Everybody, they can recognize the sustainership, the rububiyyah that is happening in our own formation in the womb. Yeah, I just wanted to put a bit there.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's the rahmah in the message of the Quran, that anyone can benefit from it. And of course, because it's a sign, someone who has more information, more knowledge in the topic will understand the same words at a much deeper level. Yeah, but still, everyone, there is something for everyone, alhamdulillah, because it's guidance for everyone. Thank you. So the point here is that we read in the name of our Rabb, which means that our intention, our niyyah, is to find the name of our Rabb in whatever we observe, in whatever we learn. And with this intention, is it possible to not be amazed at the creation? I mean, just with even if we still haven't not learned the details of the reading, just the intention changes how we perceive the creation and how we respond to it. In which ways? In the way that when we don't have the intention, we miss lots of things. Because when there is no intention, there is no attention. For instance, if we enter a room, and let's say there is a glass sitting on the table, but it's an office, for instance, it's not a kitchen. If I am looking for a glass, if it's my intention to look for the glass, I will see it immediately. But if I have no such intention, I'm just passing by, it won't attract my attention. So intention and attention are very much related. It doesn't mean that we start making up things. It means that things that were there and we did not notice before start attracting our attention. And that's why intention is so important. And
Dr. Yamina, just to footnote again, this is easily seen in comparison with the kids as well. Like sometimes if you're with a child and you enter into a store, what they see and what you see is very different. Like I see situations where the child will say, oh, there's a soccer ball hanging from the ceiling. And I hadn't noticed it. And I was like, oh yeah, there's a soccer ball. But
because you're looking for something else.
Shopping, So even at that very simple level, the way we're attuned to the world and the way we expect things, it changes what we see.
Yes, exactly. So the intention is to find the name of our Rabb in whatever we do, we see, we observe and learn. And so how we are taking, we're taken from one stage to another, not only from before birth. Before birth is not everyone can reflect on it because we may not have the knowledge, but at least after, that is something that we will, inshallah, reflect on with this intention to find the name of our Rabb. And once we have that intention, then it starts speaking to us. It starts speaking to us. It doesn't mean that before it was not speaking. It means that before I was not hearing, I was not seeing. Although I am created hearing and seeing can be understood at different levels. I can hear and see as we use it in a daily life, but also hearing and seeing the deeper meanings of things, their reality, their tasbihat, their witnessing and testifying to their Rabb and their Creator, their mirroring and reflecting the beautiful names of God, the Wajhullah, the face of things that look to Him. So the moment we have this intention, then we start being interested in an aspect of things that otherwise it wouldn't come to our mind. Like, who sustains the baby with milk alone? Who makes us grow? Who makes that baby grow and stand up and then walk? And who makes her hear and see and talk? And who makes her respond and interact meaningfully with her environment? And at least in the beginning, at least intuitively, we will recognize that that's her Rabb. That is our Rabb. And subhanAllah, another way is, although we're all unique in some ways, we all go through the same pattern of growth, more or less. We may not walk at the same age, but walking people who can walk, healthy people, they started walking sometime when they were toddlers and babies. So the same pattern is also a sign that we are all being brought up, being sustained by the same Rabb, one Rabb. It's like our faces. Each face, each voice even, each fingerprint is unique, which is a sign that it's not the chain production process. Each one is unique, each one is made individually, yet we can recognize them for what they are. So these two characteristic, let's say, properties are indications that we have all the same one Rabb. So my Rabb is the Rabb of everyone. So after considering our creation from a clinging clot and reflecting on our very humble origins and our inherent weakness, our inherent vulnerability, our being totally dependent on being given life and being sustained in life right here and now and at every stage of our life, we are asked, after doing all this and recognizing that, yes, whoever is sustaining us through all these stages, whoever is creating this, he is the Rabb. He is my Rabb, my Rabb who creates. اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق. And then again, we are asked to read. اقرأ وربك الأكرم. Read, for your Rabb, your sustainer, is the most generous, the most noble. And we talked about the term Akram, which has more meaning than just one word in English. And so it means that continue the reading. It's an invitation to continue, an instruction to continue the reading in the name of our Rabb, keeping in mind how this time he's describing himself as generous and noble. And so how do we confirm the message of this ayah? Because we just saw how we are the recipient of his generosity, how we are, and about being noble, we talked about it as well. How that this name of God manifests in our creation? The answer is given before, because we were a drop, a zygote, small thing, helpless thing, and then we are brought up into this human being. And ayah 4 and 5 give us even more specifically what makes us kareem, the ikram, the karrama there, the takreem is specifically in something that is given to human beings alone. And we are told in ayah 4 and 5, الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم. So who is this ربك الأكرم, our most generous, most noble Rabb? He's the one who has taught by means of the pen and writing, because qalam also has a connotation of writing. And he taught human being what he did not know. Subhanallah. So these ayahs are reminding us how we were able to read from the beginning of this ayah. How were we able to understand and listen and read the words, even the literal words, and reflect? These ayats are reminding us how we are able to read, think, contemplate, and consider the ayat, the Quranic ayat 1 to 3, and the ayat in the creation that they refer us to, specifically the creation of human being from a clinging cloth. So we are being, so far in ayat 2 to 3, we have been guided to be more conscious, to be more mindful, and not to take for granted these gifts of reading, of understanding, of reflecting, of acquiring knowledge, of figuring out things, of being at awe of what we saw and observed and witnessed. All these are gifts. And these ayats are telling us that they are given to you. And especially in 4 and 5, it says, allama, you are being taught. The reading sometimes we can think that we are reading in the name of God, but forget about the self who is doing the reading. It seems to us that the knowledge is being given to me, but I am the reader. I am the active reader, understander. The subject is very active there. And in ayah 4 and 5, we are told, no. That is also taught to you. Subhanallah, it's just beautiful. So we are also told that it is our Rabb who teaches us by means of the pen and writing. We are being taught to read, we are being taught to understand. How? I mean, from the beginning, we are created as conscious beings. We take that for granted, but when we pause and our intention is to understand how does he teach us, then we can start. First, we are created as conscious beings that can read and acquire knowledge. And if any of those faculties that are given to us were to cease, we have no power. We have no power to bring them back. If someone is goes into coma and there is no consciousness, so it's very low, it depends on the case, that person can't do anything about it. And if we stop being conscious, there would be no I, no me to begin with. So that I, when I say I read, I understand, I have to, these ayat are an invitation to pause and reflect on what it really means when I say I read. I read, but not in my name, in his name. He's the reader, he's the one enabling the reading. He provides what is to be read, how it's read, and all the resources for me to be able to read it. Subhanallah. And this is important because unless I can affirm that, then that tawheed, that rububiyya, tawheed al-rububiyya, that rububiyya will be always missing, lacking in the sense that part of it, God is the Rabb to a certain extent. When it comes to the reading, for instance, in this particular case, then I am the one doing the reading. Not that I claim to be doing it, but I don't need to claim it. I just take it for granted. It's so ingrained in my perception of myself and what I'm doing that I don't even question it. And so there, he's not my Rabb, as if. I'm not aware that he's my Rabb there as well, because there I'm so convinced that I am doing the reading. But I'm asked to do the reading in his name means not in my name. Even the reading is done. The process of reading itself, not only what I read, is in his name, is to be in his name. Then Tawheed will be full, 100%. There is no 90% is not Tawheed. It's not like 90% Tawheed, 10% shirk. The moment there is a little shirk, then it's shirk. It's not Tawheed anymore. In that area, in that point, in that action. That's why it's so important. And because it's very easy for us to forget these invaluable gifts, because it's very easy to take them for granted. And why do we take them for granted? Because we live in ghafla, in heedlessness. And the only way to get out of ghafla is to hold on to the guidance of the Quran. It means to practice it, to take it at heart, to listen and obey and practice. And once we figure out something, once we become aware of something, accept it, say yes to it, be radi with it, surrender to that reality, our reality of being totally dependent on our Rabb's sustaining us, his creativity, his making us read, for instance. He's making us understand. He's making us conscious. He's creating us alive in the very beginning. He is the sustainer, the giver of life and the sustainer of life. It's not like he gave us life and now we are alive on our own. Astaghfirullah. So from another perspective, we can see this as also, it's an invitation to increase our consciousness as, or mindfulness, as opposed to ghafla. To get out of heedlessness, it means increase the level of our consciousness, which is possible through reflecting on the ayat in the Quran by means of the ayat of the, reflecting on the ayat in the creation by means of the ayat of the Quran. And the higher the consciousness of the believer, the higher his realization of being a abd, meaning being the recipient of the gifts of his Rabb, and the higher the possibility of his knowing his Rabb, and the higher possibility of his iman increasing bi'idhnillah. So can you see how powerful, how full of guidance it's packed? These few verses, these 5 first revealed ayat are packed with guidance and mercy and rahmah. We are being taught to read, and whoever is enabling us to read is our most noble and generous Rabb. الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم. So last week we reflected a little on the miracle of language, that being able to speak and understand sounds is a miracle, and of reading as well. One is sounds and one is signs like scribbled signs, and the miracle of learning by means of the pen and writing. So these are miracles, but we tend to take it for granted that human beings speak if we teach them. And of course, they learn. If you teach them, they're going to learn to read. It seems to us like that, but it's not obvious. And the more we reflect, last week and the week before, we talked about how miraculous it is that we can learn language and we can learn reading and represent abstraction of concepts. And it's not obvious at all. And we mentioned how an animal, for instance, a cat, a pet in your home, it doesn't learn language. It can live in the home for years and years. It will never pick up the language because the fitra of the cat is different. It is not created with that ability. It has other abilities that we do not have. So the cat does not learn language, even if you try to teach the cat. You can only teach animals what they are created to learn from their fitra. So it's not only about teaching, like teaching the words, but about some deeper inherent teaching. The fact that we come into the world with these abilities. Subhanallah, animals surpasses in many things, in sight, in hearing, even insects. There are insects who can see much better than we do, or hear much here. Their spectrum of seeing and hearing is much wider than ours. In physical strength, they run faster or they're stronger or something. But human beings surpass them in intellect and consciousness and heart. That's the ta'aleem. The ta'aleem, the teaching. We are taught, it says. We have taught you. That allama is allama is to teach, and the gerund, the ing from it, the process is ta'aleem. And so far, read has been repeated twice, and so is teach. There was iqra and then iqra, and there was allama and then allama. The read there, the iqra, is repeated, which can be understood as the reading is emphasized again because it is so important. Usually, repetition in the Quran is an indication to importance. And we can understand that. We repeat the things that we repeat the most are the things that are the most important. For instance, an example that I always give because it's so simple and yet we miss it often. We eat a few times a day, and if we skip a day of two, it's okay. We can still survive. With water, it's a little bit, if we don't drink for a whole day, we're going to get weak and dehydrated and feel the need for water or some liquid. But when it comes to air, we do it continuously, all the time, non-stop, because we need it the most. If we stop for a few minutes, we're gone. We are not in life anymore. And so it is in the Quran, repetition is a sign to importance. Something is important. And of course, each repetition is not repeating the same thing in exactly the same way, but attracting our attention to its importance and adding a layer of meaning to it. And so here the reading, we saw how the second reading added a layer within the context, because we got to know our Rabb in a deeper way. And reading in general, so far, from what we understand from reading, is our gateway onto the light of the divine. These few ayahs were the result of the encounter of the Prophet Muhammad والسلام, with the divine. And this message is so powerful, it transformed the life of the Prophet ﷺ forever. And it transformed the whole world after he shared the message with the world. So this message has the power to transform lives. It has the power to transform the lives of those who embody the message, those who take it at heart and apply it. And in this message, we are taught how to find the path to the divine in everything, including within ourselves, within our own creation. And so this time, God introduces himself in the second time. When God introduced himself as the most generous Rabb, we saw how we can read in this particular way is a gift itself. And the gift of reading includes the gift of knowing, of knowledge, knowing who we are, knowing our purpose in this world, knowing the purpose of and meanings of the creation. This is what we talked about last week. And so knowledge is light. It's a light in the sense that it makes the unfamiliar familiar. It transforms darkness into light. It is a key to knowing ourselves. It is a key to knowing our ubudiyah, and therefore who our Rabb is, becoming aware of his rububiyah, witnessing his rububiyah, getting to know our Rabb as our most generous and noble host, the only one we can seek help from. This is very important because it may seem like, so what if I know who my Rabb is? Especially like the younger generation, because there is a disconnect with the tradition. So things that we often take for granted may not be obvious for someone who is new into the tradition, or the youth now who are growing in not only in the West, all over the world, because there is this disconnection with the tradition. That connection to our Rabb is crucial and important for us, not for our Rabb, because we need him, because everything we need, everything we long for is with him. We can only seek help from him. He's the only one who can hear us. He's the only one who can help us. So this is very important. This Rabb, this message is a message of healing, a message of rahmah. It's good news because it is for us. It's not for God. Does not need this message. He does not need our worship. We need to worship him. We need to remember him. We need to know him, because he is the only one who can sustain our life and grant us our needs and longing. He's the only one. He is the one who is sustaining our life here and now. That's why the Shahada is so important, because we need to make that Shahada, witness that reality right now. And then it becomes our knowing in the sense, not in the sense of information only, but something that we are totally convinced about, and therefore we live our life from that understanding. That's how we experience life. We experience ourselves and the world. And you can see how it is transforming, how it is so powerful, how it is so enlightening, how everything becomes meaningful when without this message, everything deep down, if we think about it, if the end is death is the end of everything, if there is no akhirah, there is no sustainer, if we just happen to be living like this, then it's all darkness, it's all in vain, it's all there is no true meaning, no true purpose. Can't be true meaning without true lasting purpose. And so in ayah 4 and 5, the reading is explained to us and why our Rabb is most generous and noble, and therefore our Rabb is most generous means we are the recipient of generosity. He is the most noble, it means we are the recipient of nobility. That's how we get to know that he is. So our most generous Rabb, Rabbuna al-Akram, is the one who teaches us knowledge by means of the pen and writing. So our Rabb honors us through teaching us reading. And so just as read is repeated twice, allama is also, he has taught, is also emphasized, and it's also repeated twice. There is an emphasis on reading and learning through the pen and writing, and therefore on the resulting knowledge. So the pen is a very important and meaningful gift that we understand, and it is consistent with another part in the Quran. There is a whole surah called Surah Al-Qalam, the pen. A whole chapter in the Quran is chapter 68 is called Al-Qalam, the pen, and it starts with Noon wal qalam wa ma yasturun. Noon is the letter N in Arabic, by the pen and that which they inscribe. Subhanallah. So you can, as you can see in this ayah, the first opening ayah of Surah Al-Qalam, God swears by the pen and what it writes. So the pen is, we talked about the pen a little bit last week as a means of preserving knowledge. And God honors human beings with knowledge. And so this capacity to know, to acquire knowledge is a gift that makes human beings potentially superior to all creations. Faddala, we are told, is God preferred, or human being all other creations. It makes human being the potential Khalifa, the representative of God on earth. And we've seen how this happens on account of this ruh, this conscious ruh that that God breathed into human being, this ability to learn all the names. And actually this ability is introduced in the Quran as allama al-asma'a. Allama is, again, he has taught all the names to human being. It's the same word, this teaching of the names. And it is on account of this ruh that he's breathed into us, and therefore that makes us able, he taught us with that, he taught us the names that God asks the angel to prostrate to Adam. We talked about it, so I'm just going through to have a more complete image of what we've learned so far. And so God asked, because of that, God asked the angels to prostrate to Adam. And prostrating to Adam means prostrating before each human being, as it is clear from various passages in the Quran, and especially in Surah Al-A'raf, ayah 10 and 11, we are told, "Indeed, O people, we have given you a place on earth and appointed thereon means of livelihood for you, yet how seldom you are grateful. Indeed, we have created you," who is the you here? People. "And then formed you. And then we said unto the angels, prostrate yourselves before Adam. Whereupon they all prostrated themselves, except Iblis, he was not among the prostrators." So here it doesn't say we created Adam and we formed him. It does say in other places, but here the same language, the same words are used for all human beings. وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَاكُمْ ثُمَّ صَوَّرْنَاكُمْ ثُمَّ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ لَمْ يَكُنْ مِنَ السَّاجِدِينَ. Subhanallah. And even in the same ayah, a little bit like after a few ayats, in ayah 27, so this is Surah Al-A'raf, Surah 7, we are told, oh, ya bani Adam, oh children of Adam. So you see the people addressed in this passage are human beings, the children of Adam. O children of Adam, do not allow Satan to seduce you in the same ways he's caused your ancestors to be driven out of the garden. And ancestors here is dual, your both ancestors. أخرج أبويكم من الجنة. So you can see that that instance of the creation of Adam refers to all humanity, every human being. There are also many hadiths encouraging the seeking of knowledge. So, and I'm sure you all heard, for instance, there is even like, there are many, but one of them is وَمَنْ سَلَكَ طَرِيقًا يَلْتَمِسْ فِيهِ عِلْمًا سَهَّلَ اللَّهُ لَهُ بِهِ طَرِيقًا إِلَى الْجَنَّةِ. Meaning, whoever seeks a path or follows a path, trying to gain with the intention to gain knowledge, Allah will make his path to paradise easy for him. Or Allah will make سَهَلَ لَهُ بِهِ طَرِيقًا. He will make, with that knowledge, he will make a path to paradise easy unto him. So knowledge is a potential path to paradise. And this knowledge needs to be sought. We have to make an effort to intend to acquire it. And there is another hadith that people share a lot, which is when a person dies, his deeds come to an end, except for three things. One is sadaqah jariyah, a charity that does not stop, something that carries on after him, a knowledge which is beneficial, or a virtuous descendant, someone who is salih, from his children, who prays for him, for the deceased. So knowledge is beneficial. Knowledge is something important as well, something that bears fruit even after our death, because it takes us, if it takes us to Jannah, it means it doesn't end with death. Subhanallah. So in Ayah 4, we're told that our Rabb teaches us by means of the pen. Then more specifically, we are told he teaches human being what he did not know. So we can understand the first reference to our being created with the ability to learn and write in order to share our knowledge with others, communicate with others, and also preserve knowledge and accumulate it. It's through writing that we can do that. Even if we're not sharing it, if I could not write things, I would forget. I would forget what I was thinking or what I learned 10 years ago, for instance. And so the pen is used here as a symbol for writing and more specifically, recording of knowledge. And this is also an explanation for read, because it tells us how we are reading, that we are taught to read. Like, how can we read? What does our Rabb ask us to read? Because he creates us with this ability, so he knows our potential and he's asking us to read. And human being, this ability that is unique to human being, this ability to transmit knowledge to through or by means of writing, recording, their thoughts, their experiences, their insight. And so we can do it at the same time. We can propagate knowledge through recording and writing, and it can also be passed from generation to generation, from one culture to another, from one civilization to another. And this means that human knowledge gains a cumulative character. And it is thanks to this ability that we are taught, or we can acquire knowledge that we could not gain on our own. There's no way one human being can do it. So even on a very basic level, we understand that the knowledge that we have, can you imagine now, you can just go Google anything, you can learn about anything on a very superficial level even. All that information, all that knowledge, I could not, how do you say? No one single individual could accumulate or so much knowledge. So that this pen is very, very important, because it makes it, from one perspective, it becomes the means to acquire immense knowledge. From another perspective, it is a sign, an ayah, that this knowledge is certainly, I'm not the source of it, because it surpasses each individual. It looks like, some people may say it is the heritage of all humanity. Yes, but if no one is the source of it, then it must have another source. Subhanallah.
And Sister Yamina, the emphasis here that this is a gift, right? Because otherwise we don't need the Quran to tell us how pen is useful, or how pen and paper enabled human beings to share knowledge across distances. That's an observation that anybody who studies history of ideas or history of
careful,
no,
anyone who's careful can get to know that. But here,
here we don't need revelation as a means to get to know that.
Here it's we are taught by God.
Here the emphasis is
it's a gift of God.
Touch into this fact that you're able to understand symbolic language, which no animal ever does, right? They don't use symbols, or they don't write. So you pay attention to this. This is a gift from your Creator.
And it's a gift that surpasses any one of us. Like, each one of us cannot achieve this as a single individual. However smart you are, however hardworking you are, you cannot achieve this. And even as like the synergy of all people bringing all that together, that process itself makes it clearer that it is a gift from God, that we are being indeed taught, that we are not the source of any of this. And so the double.
What would you say, Dr. Yamina, to the fact that the Prophet ﷺ never knew how to write and never read something that was written in the literal sense? We touched on Ummi. Not in this halakha, in another halakha. But how would we reflect on that fact that the Prophet is reciting these passages?
I don't know if it was in this or somewhere else, but we talked about not only one is the Prophet is Ummi, which means illiterate. Also, it means you are illiterate, has also a sense in Arabic. Ummi, you are as when you were born from your mother, from the means you didn't learn something new. So it has a double sense. One, that he didn't, because if he could read, can you imagine now all Orientalist explanation? They say, there were other religions around, and he heard from them. and he learned from them, and then he put it in the new form, and that's the Quran, which just doesn't make sense. So can you imagine if he was a scholar or if he could read, the more qualified as a scholar he would have been, the more they would say it's his scholarship, because that's what we do. We don't attribute the gift to the gifter. We attribute it to ourselves in our ghafla and heedlessness. So to make it more transparent, Allah made it easier for people. He was not a poet in that time. There were lots of poets in that society, and they were very valued. So he was not a poet, so they would say, oh yes, he was very gifted. Gifted, when we say someone is gifted, people don't think that it is a gift from God. He was born with the gift. It's his gift. That's how we understand it. That's how it's perceived. So the person becomes valuable on account of the gift, as if he was the source of the gift. And if you ask them, like, but he was born that way, it's not. That's what ghafla is. Ghafla is not asserting something. It's the lack of asserting the reality. And so in that confusion, in that darkness, those shirki thoughts can thrive. And it's the same for the whole peninsula, the whole place where he was, when the Prophet ﷺ came. It was not a place where that thrived in philosophy or anything like that, because then they would definitely say it was a new philosophy. There were philosophies like that, and he learned from them and things like that. This is how human beings are, not only in trying to explain a phenomenon as significant as this, but even in our life. Something happens, and for instance, you're waiting for a document to come. The protocol is that it comes in 6 weeks. Isra will know what I'm talking about. There's no need to talk about the details. But then you receive it in 2 weeks. Immediately, what comes to our mind? Immediately, oh, how come? Maybe there were not so many people on the line. Maybe this and this. We try to look for reasons to explain it, but the problem is those reasons are not connected to our Rabb, as if that thing is happening haphazardly in disconnection with our Rabb, and we try to make sense of it as if when we even, let's say, there were not many people who applied, that's why the process didn't last long. Still, usually it lasts longer. Actually, 6 weeks, I was told, was the minimum. And then I learned that people wait for 6 months, for a year, for even more than a year. Okay, so even if there was a reason within the world for it, that reason also didn't have to happen then. So you see how we are prone to try to understand and explain the world without reference to our Rabb. Why? Because when we perceive ourselves in disconnection with our Rabb, then we try to explain things without reference to him. But when you remember, you say, Astaghfirullah. Of course, it's a gift from God. It came just when I needed it. That's it. Just be grateful. Just say Alhamdulillah. Why are you trying to explain it away? And then it happened because of this and that. So I say Alhamdulillah, but actually, it's not really from God, as if. Astaghfirullah. So we have that tendency within us. And so to make it easier, to make the whole process more transparent, the Prophet ﷺ was Ummi, and the society he grew up in was like, how do you say, virgin in that sense, like not adulterated with, the thoughts they had was clear idolatry. That's it, not in between, so that we can say he learned from something else. It's like when you have a jewel and you put it, the background is like a dark velvet, so that you can appreciate the jewel. You can hear the jewel is the message of the Quran. So here
there is some also comparison made with Sayyidina Isa's birth. You know, the mother being the virgin makes it, a shining miracle. And in this case, the Prophet ﷺ being illiterate, uneducated, makes it more clear as a miracle that he is able to recite such a profound message. And then the fact that perhaps that he himself never wrote or read something written, it does not prevent him from seeing pen and its usage as a sign. Because you don't have to be able to read something written down to be able to appreciate the gift of writing. I mean, I'm talking about writing in a literal sense here, writing and reading.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to read in that sense, literal sense of reading something written, to be able to appreciate the pen and the paper and the knowledge given to human being.
Yeah. So here the double emphasis is on humans' utter dependence on God, who created him as a rather insignificant physical entity, then implanted in him the will and the ability to acquire knowledge. And so this is a sign of Rububiyyah, a sign that our Rabb is Akram, that he is the one who is teaching us whatever we learn, that we can only learn through by his will, bi'idhni Rabbi. And so from one aspect, Ayah 4, who has taught by means of the pen, points to our ability to acquire knowledge in general. Like generally speaking, teaching by means, our being taught, God teaching us by means of the pen, can be understood as meaning that our Rabb teaches us writing and equipped us with the capacity to learn and develop all kinds of knowledge, all kinds of sciences and civilization. The second emphasis in Ayah 5, which is he has taught human being what he did not know, could be understood from one perspective, of course, to knowledge that can only be learned through revelation. And this knowledge is wisdom, and it is this wisdom that we learn from revelation that is going to transform all other forms of knowledge into light and wisdom, and into something that are potential paths to paradise. So the double emphasis can also be understood, so I said, as general and as teaching of the guidance of the Quran, the wisdom of the Quran, but that wisdom of the Quran is necessary because it's only through it that all kinds of knowledge can become useful, can become light. Otherwise, they will remain just, okay, so you know something, so what? If it does not connect me to my Rabb, there is no path to Akhirah, let alone to Jannah. It's disconnected from my Rabb. So another way of looking at the double emphasis can also be understood as an indication to the process of learning. So how do we acquire knowledge? By means of the pen, by means of writing. And the second ayah, the second read, the second allama he has taught, is an indication to what we learn. So how we learn and what we learn, meaning the knowledge we impart is also we acquire is also imparted onto us. How we learn it is we are inspired, we are created with that ability to be able to learn. A cat cannot. And the result of what we learn is also a gift from our Rabb. And if we look at how we learn and what we learn, we will actually know our Rabb as this generous and noble creator, Rabb, who made us so noble, gave us such an intellect, such a consciousness that, subhanallah, we can learn and reflect on what we learned, reflect on how we learn, subhanallah. It's light upon light, and it's ayah within ayah. So when we reflect on the process of learning, it becomes clear that knowledge is given to us, that we are not the source of this knowledge. Otherwise, why would we look for it in the first place, right? If we were the source of knowledge, why should we strive to understand and do all the research and the work? Just be and it is. In order to be the source of knowledge, we have to have the power of be and it is, and we don't. It's very clear. It's only within ghafla we can attribute anything to ourselves. So that knowledge is clearly not ours, and it is not out there either. Although we are inspired through what's going around us, but the world out there is not giving us knowledge either. But often, unless something comes to our mind without effort, we don't recognize the gift. We don't recognize it as a gift, because the more we effort, the more we make efforts, the more likely we are to imagine ourselves to be the source of what comes to us. We say we did all this and this and this and this. Oh, that's why I reached this conclusion. Yes, but how? Take each step, each stage of those efforts, and you understand that you were only asking. We cannot produce. It's like growing a plant. I can say I'm growing it. Yes, but the seed is already, you find the seed, you put it out there. I used the water that's already created and watered it, and I just waited for it to come. How do we understand? We read and wait. What are we waiting for? For understanding to be given to us. Yeah, we say understood as it's a way of speaking, but it doesn't mean that I'm the source of the understanding. Understanding is a gift. So usually we think the more effort, the more it becomes that effort, and that our work becomes like a veil onto the gift. We only acknowledge that it's a gift when it comes suddenly out of nowhere, as if everything has to be like this, but that's not how it happens. And when we pause and reflect, we can understand this, inshallah. And we can understand how we are inspired. We can see inspiration, particularly, we feel it more in creative processes. And even people who do not necessarily believe in God acknowledge inspiration, like writers and artists, and they mostly acknowledge that aspiration is a key motivator of creativity, even if they often don't link it to a divine source. Somehow they were inspired. But inspiration in itself is an ayah. It is an indication that we are being taught right here and now. It means knowledge is imparted onto us. We are being taught. And this is the ta'aleem, the teaching that we have been imparted, that has been imparted onto us as we were brought into being, like the علم آدم الأسماء كلها. For instance, the names were all given to us when we were being created, before coming into the world, or before being born. When the soul comes into the body, with it comes the knowledge of the name, the teaching of the name. Sorry, not the knowledge, the teaching, because the knowledge is how we use that potential. That potential is going to, it may not thrive in the world if we don't use it. And this word allama is repeated many times in the Quran. He has taught. It's a word that's familiar to us. For instance, Surah Al-Rahman, which is recited a lot during Ramadan, for instance. The first ayat of Surah Al-Rahman, which is Surah 55, the first 4 ayat are استعيذ بالله السميع العليم الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان. So the compassionate, he has taught the Quran, he has created human being, and he has taught him articulate thought and speech. علمه البيان. البيان here means something by means of which things become clear to us, are made clear to us. So it applies to the process of thinking and the speech, because we can only speak about something when we can distinguish it intellectually in our thoughts. That's why we can't express well something that is not clear in our mind. And so al-bayan is the faculty of making a thing or an idea or a concept clearly apparent to the mind, and so that we can distinguish it as a concept from other things and from other ideas. And so we can talk about it. And so we can name it. We can give it a name. And that's why bayan refers to the power to express this ability, this cognitive ability, clearly in spoken or written language. In Arabic, when you say bayan, it has all these meanings. When you say bayyin, it's a clear language which is understood as the clarity of the thought is reflected in the clarity of the language, whether spoken or written. So this bayan is taught to us. How would I know? And we talked about the abstraction and how do we distinguish concepts? How do we understand them? We don't know. It's just there. That's it. And if we look at how small kids understand things, you will understand that's just there. That's the fitrah. We are created that way. It is taught to us. We're also told in Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah 2, Ayat 238, it says, bear God in mind, فَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ كَمَا عَلَّمَكُم مَا لَمْ تَكُونُوا تَعْلَمُونَ. Since it is He who has taught you what you did not know before. So this expression of He taught you what you didn't know is also repeated in the Quran. In Surah An-Nisa, Surah 4, Ayah 113, at the end of the ayah, again it says, وَأَنزَلَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَعَلَّمَكَ مَا لَمْ تَكُنْ تَعْلَمْ وَكَانَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكَ عَظِيمًا. God has sent upon you the book and wisdom, and He has taught you what you didn't know, and God's favor upon you is tremendous indeed. So this, He taught you what you did not know, is repeated, and usually it is linked with the teaching of the Quran. He teaches you the book, wisdom, and what you didn't know. So they are related. Wisdom is related to revelation. Mostly in the Quran, it's many times it's used for various messengers and prophets of God, that he taught them the book and wisdom.
Dr. Yamina?
Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. There's another verse I came across in Surah Nahl 1678, which is also very pertinent regarding this. It says, Wallahu akhrajakum min butuni ummahatikum la ta'lamuna shay'in wa ja'ala lakum as-sama wal absara wal afida la'allakum tashkurun. So, you know, when I mean, let me read the translation. And Allah brought you out of the wombs of your mothers while you knew nothing, and gave you hearing, sight, and intellect. So perhaps you would be thankful. So, I mean, when the kids are born, you know, the process of learning starts. And that's mostly about the environment in which they live and all that. So this, we can connect the ikhra that came to the Prophet ﷺ. That is a different kind of knowledge, which has to be given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there are two kinds of knowledge. No, there's no word like knowledges. I'm sorry. You know, one is the
innate from creation.
Yeah, creational stuff about the world and the universe, the ayats, and the other is the one which has to be taught by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I mean, he's the source of knowledge for both, but this is basically, there's no way that we can think about it even if we get 2 lifetimes, you know, double the amount of time we are given, we will never be able to get to the clarity, that the revelation. That's why it's extremely important that, you know, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us directly through the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the form of the wahi. So they're two different.
That's the two emphases I was referring to. One is the general one. Everyone, whether we listen to revelation or not, whether we are aware of it or not, we are taught. The way we are created, we are taught. And then the second one is the one we are taught in the Ayah 5 is what you didn't know. That is directly related to revelation. But without it is the second kind of knowledge that is going to make any other knowledge useful. Otherwise, the other knowledge is going to, at best, is going to only be take us to the door of the grave. After death, it doesn't benefit us. And at worst, it can cause a lot of misery, because we see when knowledge is unguided, when there is no guidance, there is no compassion, there is no accountability, there is no akhirah, there is no why should people don't care about others, because if accountability is based on fear, then it works only to a certain extent, because when people have power and they can get away with lots of stuff, then there's nothing to stop them. Morality, values easily can crumble when there is no, how do you say, no grounding of reality, no akhirah. It's there, it's in the fitrah, but it's not easy to flourish, and it's easy to rot and becomes like, instead of going to ahsan al-taqweem, it's the best of pattern in which we are created potentially. It's easy for humanity or human beings to reach asfal as-safilin, get lower and lower in many ways. So yes, from one perspective, I understand it, as you said, as two indication. The double emphasis is indication to the two types of knowledge, and the second one is what makes the first one whole and useful and a path to Jannah.
So I have a question. So is there in Quranic vocabulary, are these two mentioned separately? Like I think in Surah Kahf, it's called Ilm Ludun, the one which is given from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Ilm, I'm not pronouncing it correctly.
Ilm Ladun or min Ladunna, like
Ladunna.
like who was it? Musa alayhi salam, when he in Surah Al-Kahf, when he is with his companion and he meets Al-Khadr,
right.
and he's described as abdan min ibadina, and then they said they found one of our abd, our servants, on whom أتيناه فوجد double, like Musa and his friend عليه السلام, عبدا من عبادنا أتيناه رحمة من عندنا وعلمناه من لدنا علما. So we have given him rahmah from ourselves, and we have taught him a knowledge from ourselves, from our And then Musa alayhi salam asks him, هل أتبعك على أن تعلمني مما علمت رشدا. He asks, can I follow you so that you may teach me some of the guidance, of the rushd that you have been taught. So it's all the teaching here, علم علمت, is repeated many times.
So is there any terminology used by the Quran about ilm dunya, I mean?
No, because, that's a good point, because there is no separation between the world and the secular, let's say, and the otherworldly, or or religious, or the divine, anything, because everything within the dunya is a potential means to know God. When we read Bismillah, Bismi Rabbika alladhi khalaq. So that's why this reading Bismi Rabbika alladhi khalaq is the bridge, is the alchemy, is the formula, the key, the alchemy that makes everything worldly into otherworldly. Everything that looks secular and knowledge of the world becomes potential knowledge to Jannah, because it becomes knowledge of the signs, of the ayat.
So it gives meaning, purpose.
And
right?
not only it gives purpose, it gives meaning, purpose. It gives it transforms how we perceive things, that we start hearing what they are truly saying. Otherwise, the other knowledge that is divorced from wahy, from revelation, from the Quran, is actually not true knowledge. There are part of it, it's like, let's say we don't understand a language. We study all and it's written, let's say it's a manuscript, written in a language that we don't know. So we say, there are lots of letters. This letter looks like an A in English. It's a little bit different. It has this, it has that. All our description is correct. However, we still didn't figure out the true meaning of the message. We're talking about the quality of the paper. We're talking about how old it is. We're talking about all kinds of things, the quality of the ink, but we're not talking about the meaning of what it expresses. And so it is when we study the world without the guidance of the Quran, we may learn how to use it, how to benefit from it in a worldly way, but unless we learn what those benefits are pointing to and how they are testifying to their Rabb. Okay, so we live a more knowing life, a more comfortable life if we have, let's say, technology or something. But then that's it. It remains limited to the worldly. However, potentially, that's not how it is created. It is created primarily to make the Rabb known. Even the benefits are there to make him known as the beneficiary, as the generous, as if we find how to use something to heal people, it is to show how he is the healer, for instance.
Right. So this Sama, Basar and Fuad. Remember last time we discussed about Fuad?
Yes.
It was about Musa alayhi salam's mother. The Fuad was Fariq, something like that, was empty. So I don't understand one thing. This Sama, Basar, I do understand, but Afida, all these three things are kind of a receptive senses that through which we learn, right?
Yeah, but in order to use the Iqra bismi rabbika, we have to use al-afida as well, not only because otherwise we are told animals also can see and hear, but
yeah, but afida is translated in the Quran by different translators as heart.
Yes.
Afida, fuad. So how can a heart? I mean, the fuad is what basically it's the emotions, right?
It's the inner heart.
Yeah, the emotions, but inner heart, which is involved with emotions, isn't it?
Yeah, but emotions, yes. But
so how can emotion help you to?
If it is inner, it means sorry. I was talking today to someone in another language. Okay. When we said in the beginning, I was saying, when we look at the creation first, we feel awe. Awe is an emotion. Now,
right.
Yeah. So how I use it, if I'm listening to the heart, to the inner heart, because if I'm not careful, I may not even realize that I'm feeling awe. But when I slow down and make that intention, I become aware that I'm filled with awe. So I stay with that awe. I welcome it. I listen to it. And even if I'm not proficient in the language of the ayat, I still can feel that it's saying something very important is going on, right?
Right.
So the fu'ad is very important.
Subhanallah.
Yeah, subhanallah. And the key, the bridge is here, that ingredients that makes anything into gold, anything into imani, into iman, into potential iman, into potential path to Jannah, is the Iqra bismi rabbika, the reading in the name of our Rabb. Subhanallah. Yeah, thank you.
Jazakallah.
So from all this, what we learn, or what is being taught to us, because when we are learning, something is being taught to us. And what was taught to the Prophet ﷺ, the knowledge of our Rabb. We get to suddenly become aware that we have a Rabb, and we get to know who this Rabb is. Can you imagine? And this is given to us by means of studying the creation. The world, how we are created, how everything else is created. Because, I keep repeating because I feel the need, because it's so important, because they are created as ayat, as signs, speaking of their Rabb. That's where we ended our discussion last week. Everything, the ayat, speak about their Rabb. They reveal him to us with his most beautiful attribute. They glorifying him. They make tasbih. They proclaim his names. They proclaim that he alone is the creator. He alone is the generous one. He alone is the compassionate one. And that is why when we study the world in this way, that knowledge becomes wisdom, becomes light because it is enlightened with the guidance of the Quran, because it is a reading in the name of God, not just studying like that haphazardly. Or usually we don't do it haphazardly. Rarely people have an inner will to know, a curiosity which is given, but usually the fu'ad comes there, that there is a feeling. Either some people have genuine feelings, they want to help people, they want to know how something works, or some people just want to make money. So how do I exploit this situation or power or whatever the intention is. And that's why when we study the history of Islamic civilization, one characteristic particularly attracts the attention, and it is the great importance that was given to seeking knowledge at a scale that was not witnessed before. I mean, I remember studying history of Islamic science, and there were the books that I read, many of them were written by Westerners, and this is what they were saying, like, no one saw this before, like these people were so passionate about learning everything suddenly, and it is a phenomenon that was not witnessed before. Seeking knowledge systematically. There was knowledge, but systematically at a mass level, it was new. Like public, people started, everyone started learning to read and write because everyone wanted to at least read the Quran and understand it. So before, in other well-known civilizations and culture, people who read were only the privileged. But suddenly Islam came, everyone started reading and learning, writing. And with reading and writing, all kinds of opportunities and doors open up. And that's why when we study history, we can see that right from the beginning of Islam, education was valued. And not only it was valued, but it was very quickly made available to the masses. And it was very much encouraged. So it was made available and it was encouraged. Like this hadith encouraging knowledge and seeking knowledge were repeated again and again. And so people it was like learning was a good thing. Everyone had to at least read the Quran. And that's one reason, very quickly, Muslims reach a very high level of literacy. And not only literacy, but also cultural, scientific knowledge became more and more widespread and very advanced compared with their neighboring, let's say, societies. And if we consider the Arabs, for instance, their intellectual history begins with the rise of Islam. Before the rise of Islam, their main cultural achievements were poetry mainly and literary traditions. They were not interested in other things. And they were transmitted mostly orally. There was writing. We know that because the Kaaba was, they used to put qasidas, how to say, poems on the most valued popular poems were honored by being hanged on the walls of the Kaaba. And so there were other, of course, social, political, religious, and moral aspects of their life, but the main breakthrough happens with the rise of Islam. And it brought them a coherent worldview, and worldview is very important. And this worldview transcended the confines of their tribal life. Before, they were thinking only within a very limited, very limited understanding of what the world was. The world was only the tribes around them. And very quickly, with the expansion, the more people around embraced Islam, the Muslims had to confront different cultures, different religions, not only from outside, but also from within, because people who had other religions, other philosophies, other understanding came into Islam, and they started having questions, had to answer those questions and everything. And so they had to come up with answers to make their creed clearer to themselves and to anyone around them. And for instance, theology was developed at that time. I mean, theology was an answer to, or answers to, specific questions. And that's why a good deal of the work of the earliest theologians, you can see that it consisted in, answering arguments that were made against Islam by non-Muslims, for instance. And at the same time, because of the repeated encouragement to observe the creation in the Quran, we saw this again and again, and study the creation in order to witness God's power and knowledge, Muslims started, it became part of the culture. People started becoming interested in the creation. And slowly, they started to study the world in a systematic way. And this phenomenon was not seen before. There was studying of the world, but not in a systematic way. So this was, many historians of Islamic science also, they see it as a response to the exhortations of the Quran to investigate the ayat, the signs in the world. And so Muslims adopted the experimental method to get to know the creation. The experimental method was not methodical before. If you look at the Greeks and things, it didn't exist at all. It was all about theoretical, how do you say, not surmising, but not assumptions, but thoughts that are not based on observation. Could it be like this? It could be this. This is it. Speculations, sorry, this is the word I was looking for. It was based mostly on speculation. But with Muslims, experimenting became important because you had to witness. So observation and experiment became the main vehicle of their scientific venture, let's say. And this way they introduced a new outlook to science. And their achievements in the field of experimental science opened new gateways and new vistas for the development of the so-called modern science as we understand it now. This is a quote from a European historian of science. The work is not only about Muslims, about many civilizations in particular times. And this is what he says about, when he says Arab, actually in the original text he says Arab, but actually he means Muslim, because there was a time when people still confused Muslim and Arab. So he says science owes a great deal more to Muslim culture. It owes its sorry, I read it wrong. The emphasis was wrong. The intonation was wrong. Science owes a great deal more to Muslim culture. It owes its very existence. The ancient world was, as we saw, pre-scientific. The astronomy and mathematics of the Greeks were a foreign importation, never thoroughly acclimatized in Greek culture. The Greeks systematized, generalized, theorized the patient's ways of investigation, the accumulation of positive knowledge, the minute methods of science, detailed and prolonged observation, experimental inquiry were altogether alien to the Greek temperament. Only in Hellenistic Alexandria was any approach to a scientific work conducted in the ancient classical world. What we call science arose in Europe as a result of a new spirit of inquiry, of new methods of investigation, of the method of experiment, observation, measurement, of the development of mathematics in a form unknown to the Greeks. That spirit and those methods were introduced into the European world by the Muslims. The spirit in which the Muslims made use of existing materials was the exact opposite of that of the Greeks. It supplied precisely what had been the weak and defective aspect of Greek genius. And he also says, there can be no doubt that our estimate of that influence must err on the side of the under rather than of overestimation. It is highly probable that but for the Muslims, modern European civilization would never have arisen. It is certain that but for them, it would not have assumed that character which has enabled it to transcend all previous phases of evolution, for although there is not a single aspect of European growth in which the decisive influence of Islamic culture is not traceable, nowhere is it so clear and momentous as in the genesis of that power which constitute the paramount distinctive force of the modern world and the supreme source of its victory, natural science and the scientific spirit. So, of course, he gives particular examples, but I'm not going there. And if you go and read any history of science, even though usually it's skipped, but still you will see that a layman in Muslim Spain, for instance, had hundreds of books in their homes where there were no universities then, but the only place where there were books in Europe were in churches and convents, and they had few books. So it was beyond comparable. It was a totally very, very new phenomenon that everyone was so much into studying and learning, and this learning, experimentally observing the world and measuring and recording the results and everything systematically was something most honest, how do you say, historians of science will say it started with Muslims, but few will go into how did it start. Why did it start with Muslims? Why not before? I mean, those people were the same. Why once they became Muslim it started? Because it's something that they learned in the Quran. There is a clear link, connection. When we look with that intention, it becomes clear. So I'll end with, I mean, there are so many things, but you can go and read about it. Like, for instance, the world was flat in Europe, because, you know, usually the history we learn, especially history of culture and science, is very Eurocentric. We don't know what was going on in the rest of the world. For instance, we learned that people thought that the earth was flat. Yes, but for instance, we know that Al-Idrisi drew the world as spherical when everyone in Europe thought it was flat. So it was, there are things that needs to be learned, and all the longitudes, latitudes, and were drawn into maps by that time, by the time of Al-Mamnoon, for instance, in Baghdad. And one of the reasons these things happened, one of the reasons that encouraged these systematic studies, especially when it comes with mapping and knowing that the world is spherical, is, for instance, the prayer, the salat. You have to know the time of the salat, or the traveling for the Hajj, and also because they traveled for the Hajj, there was no internet and all these things that time, but people met at least once a year, and from all over the Muslim world, and they shared knowledge. Now they only share, people go there to shop and astaghfirullah, but people shared knowledge, spiritual knowledge, knowledge of the world, scientific knowledge, all kinds of things were going on. So the Hajj also has a role to play in all these things. But I want to end with some clarification. One thing is, in this Quranic worldview, there is no separation between the worldly and the religious. The world is the creation of God. It is created, they are created as signs that testify to His Rububiyyah, that mirror His most beautiful names. Therefore, as we study the world with this attitude, with this consciousness, with this Iman, it brings us closer to our Rabb, closer to Akhirah. Like the Prophet ﷺ says, "Ad-dunya mazra'atul akhirah." This world is the nursery for Akhirah. It's where everything is planted and will grow, and we will reap the crops in Akhirah. So there is no separation. One is created for the other. One mirrors the other. The world is not an obstacle to the divine. It's not an obstacle to Akhirah. It's not about God or the world, or let's have both God and the world. No. It is about making shahada. The world testifies to God, and we testify to their testification. And that's how we make the shahada. Another point is the result of such study, the reflection on creation, yields enlightened knowledge. It yields hikmah, wisdom. And the science that is born of this venture brings light, it brings justice, it brings well-being to humanity. It does not yield exploitation of other creatures, of other human beings, of animals, of including nature, because it is not based on struggle and competition for power and wealth. It is not based on a vision of perception, a worldview of scarcity, because it is based on cooperation. It is based on an understanding of abundance, because there is a connection. Everything, ourselves and everything, is connected to our Rabb. We are being sustained right here and now. So there is no, it doesn't make sense to fight and compete for power. Power is only with Him. And it doesn't make sense to compete for wealth and resources, because they are given by Him. We seek them only in lawful, moral ways in how we are guided. You can't steal from someone else, for instance. So this the resulting science, the resulting culture, the resulting civilization of this reflection, of this seeking of knowledge, is based on cooperation, on the desire to serve others, to protect the weaker, all in the name of our Rabb, in the name of the most merciful, the most compassionate. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We're supposed to do everything from beginning to end, Bismillah. And as the Prophet ﷺ says, all khair, all goodness is in Bismillah. And without Bismillah, everything is abtar. There is no khair outside of Bismillah. Because outside of Bismillah, even if it is not harmful, it is not lasting. At the best, it is not lasting. Another point is, we often hear Muslims state how Muslims were so enlightened when Europe was sunk in the Dark Ages, and how sad that now everything is gone and the situation has really deteriorated. So these historical events are also an ayah. We can learn it. I believe in learning from history, all kinds of history. That's why how we write history is very important. We should have committees of people who know this and rewrite history, Bismillah, to teach. Bismillah, not just to say we are better than the others, we are stronger, they were wrong, we were right. So what's the point? So this history shows, these facts shows they are ayat, and among the messages they relate to us, I'll share a few from what I can get right now. I'm sure there are other wisdoms in it. For instance, this history shows us that however great a civilization, it is at the end transient. It does not and cannot last forever. Why? Because, I mean, even if it lasted forever, we wouldn't. Human beings wouldn't. And this is the nature of this worldly life. And all achievement in this life is fani, is transient, it's impermanent. That's why we're told in the Quran, كُلُّ مَنْ عَلَيْهَا فَانٍ وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. And ikram here is from the same root as al-akram, رَبُّكَ al-akram. So it says, كُلُّ مَنْ عَلَيْهَا فَانٍ. Whatever there is on earth, on the face of the earth, is transient and perishing. Except وَيَبْقَى, there only remains وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ, the countenance of God, the face of your Rabb, who alone possesses majesty and ikram and generosity and nobility. So from another aspect, this decline is a symptom to an inner spiritual sickness. So we need to look for the remedy. If this saddens us, it means it's like when we are weak, when we are unhealthy, we long for health. So here we're longing for something. For what are we longing for? What is the remedy? One thing is clear, is that the remedy does not consist in competing with materialistic, physicalistic, let's say materialistic, worldly civilization. It can't be this. It can't be that we compete on the same terms. And materialistic civilization and its offspring is materialistic science. And the resulting desacralization of nature and of human being and the meaning of human life and its purpose. It's desacralizing it and totally disconnecting from any higher source or any source of any values or anything. And we can see, just look at the last century, how, I mean, the worst wars that are recorded in history are the modern wars, the First and Second World War. I mean, millions and millions of people died. Why? Because before they had wars, first, they didn't last as long. Second, the weapons were not the same. Now, with technology and weapons of mass destruction, and this how would you say, the desire for wealth and power is the same as before, but now the weapons are much more destructive. So this mind, this attitude that produces these weapons of mass destruction that harm people, not only they harm them for generation, not only people, but animals and nature, and for generation, like nuclear weapons, for instance. Hasbunallah. But one may argue, but it has some benefits. I heard this a lot, but it has also, science has lots of benefits. Yes, but without Iman, even its benefits, without Iman, without Akhirah, how useful are they? Up to the door, to the grave. And I'm not saying, because people understand, oh, you are against science. No, I'm against I don't think there is any benefit in the materialistic interpretation of the study of the world. The study of the world, yes, go for it if you are interested, because they are the ayat of God. Go and read them, Bismi Rabbika alladhi khalaq. Then, inshallah, you will enlighten your life in this world and in the next, and inshallah, you will help others also to get to know their Rabb. And to get to know their Rabb, not only, for instance, you are a botanist, you find out that all kinds of different herbs and how there is healing in them. That's it. Bismi Rabbika alladhi khalaq. He is the healer. You get to know that he does not, ما خلقت هذا باطلا. You don't create anything in vain. So the more benefits, but you benefit from things without destroying them, without exploiting them, physically, materially, and spiritually, valuing them as the signs that they are, and using them respectfully, gratefully, with gratitude in the name of our Rabb, in the name of their Rabb. Cooperating with them, not exploiting anyone, working all together, not only with human being, with the whole of creation, in harmony, participating in the glorification of God, in the tasbihat. So with that understanding, with that attitude, we will find ways to that are even more beneficial for the well-being of humanity than the science we have now, without all the weapons and all the destruction, and even the good things, because they won't be done with the attitude of exploiting, making more money, there will be, the purer the intention is, the more we will be able to find, I don't know, ways like, why not? I always dream, as a child, I used to dream of science of Sulaiman alayhi salam, for instance. A science that is much more powerful than we have now, but with less work. Why not? Maybe the birds, we could communicate with the birds, and they could help us in many ways that we are unaware with. As a child, there was a book that was called Qisas al-Anbiya, the stories of the Prophet, and it was written in a novel kind of thing. And I remember the stories of Sulaiman alayhi salam, and it was like, for me, was read it again and again. It was really something mysterious and how do you say, not attractive, but something
fascinating.
Fascinating, thank you. Yeah, it was fascinating. Subhanallah. Still, when I think about it, it is fascinating. And I am sure if it is there, and many of those happenings are mentioned in the Quran, it's for a reason. It is an ayah to an indication to something that can be confirmed. So if I had the time, but I think there are more important things, I could study that, for instance. I know in physics there are all kinds of things. For instance, why not look for engines that do not pollute the atmosphere? It is possible. Theoretically, it is possible, but no one puts money in those projects, so there is no research there. So it's all about the intention. So yes, so I was saying, yes, there are some benefits, but again, without iman, without akhirah, without connection for lasting, last connection with our Rabb, with everlastingness, then, however, even the very beneficial aspects are not going to be they're not going, it depends how we use them, let's say. So my point is that we don't want to blindly imitate this misguided civilization and reproduce its exploitative, materialistic science. Let's be critical, but critical in an imani way, in an enlightened way, in a Bismillah way. Because this civilization motto, there is a Imam Nursi rahimahullah, he explains in details, but I'm just mentioning this. He says the motto of this civilization is might is right. And you can look around and see everything is might is right. In not only in explicit way, but in also very explicit ways, and also in very implicit ways too. Whereas the believer's motto, as we are taught in the Quran, is right is might. Haqq, who is right? That's where it's not a matter of whoever has the power becomes right, even when he's a wrongdoer, even when he's an oppressor. No, we have to look who is right or not. Even if the one who is at fault is the believer, he has to accept that in that situation he is not right. Because right is might, not people. And not power. The power is in the right. Allah, al-haqqu ya'lu wa la yu'la alayh. Right and haqq is above everything. Nothing can be above it. As it's a sentence that is repeated a lot. And finally, you may think, then where do we start? From within. We start from within. As look at history. Look at the where the Prophet ﷺ started. There was nothing. And suddenly, the whole world changed. Those people's world changed, and they changed the whole world around them. From within. Our perception of ourselves need to change first. And then when our perception of ourselves changes, when we start seeing ourselves for who we are, abd, totally dependent on someone else's creativity, someone else's sustaining, someone else's rububiyyah, then our perception of others will change. We'll see them as abd as well. They are being created, they are being sustained. And so now we start bonding with everything around us. There is sympathy and empathy and compassion comes automatically, flows through us. When we don't have that perception, we are blocking it because we want to impose ourselves on others or whatever. But we are blocked to the reality. And so when our perception of ourselves change, it's going to transform how we perceive others, how we perceive the world, and therefore how we know our Rabb. And this needs to be clear first, because when we need the more we know who our Rabb is, the more we don't feel the need to exploit anyone. We don't feel the need to steal from anyone. We don't feel the fear of anyone. We don't feel the anxiety of the future. We may feel it, but it doesn't last. It does not paralyze us. It does not control our life. It comes and it becomes an ayah, a messenger, reminding us that, oh, alhamdulillah, that I have a Rabb. Otherwise, if I didn't have that fear and anxiety, I wouldn't be able to appreciate the fact that I have a Rabb who is taking care of me now and in the future and after death. But that I don't become the prisoner of that fear. And when people are prisoners of their fears, they do everything. The more they are fearful, the more they will attack others and to defend ourselves and preserve themselves. And often people are skeptical about this. They say, oh, like how can this lead, how is it related to a civilizational transformation or any civilizational advancement? Well, I said, look at history, but not only a history of Islamic civilization. Any civilization in the world starts like that. They are all the products of worldviews, not vice versa. What's inside always comes first and has an impact of what's outside. Look at a very simple object right now. For instance, I have a pen now next to me. If you have a pen or you consider any object, very simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. What was this object before it became this physical thing in my hand? They were thoughts. This pen was a thought in someone's mind. This particular shape, this particular design was a thought in someone's, or a picture in someone's imagination. Then it became a thought, then it became a blueprint, maybe a drawing. So the first blueprint was not physical in the beginning. And slowly it embodied some physicality. It was a picture, or a thought, a picture, and then it became in our mind, in our imagination. Then it became, for instance, a drawing. A drawing is a little more physical. And then those thoughts were converted into, for instance, if it's something a little more complicated than even this pen, like it's a little bit sophisticated pen. So the blueprint was the first conversion of the thoughts into something written, and then the written blueprint was executed, and consequently, the object we see in front of us right now was brought into existence. So when we do not reflect, it seems like the world as we see it around us is more fundamental, and especially like the more concrete it is, the more as if the more solid it is. But it's not true. The more abstract, the more it is the beginning. Everything else is, this pen is the result of a thought. This house I'm sitting in was a thought, a desire, a thought, a blueprint, a plan, and then it became a house. So it all starts with thoughts. Then if we take the right steps and we are inspired and guided to take the right actions, then it becomes things, physical reality. So that's why we need to be careful about our inner thoughts, especially when we are in ghafla. We have so many thoughts and beliefs that are not checked, but we don't realize that they have consequences in this world and in the next. Just as they have consequences in this world, they also have consequences in Akhirah. So this is very important. Matter is not physical reality, is not the, how do you say, the basis. It is the end. It is the product of something else. Imam Nursi rahimahullah, he says, matter is not the kernel. It is not the fundament. It is not a settled abode so that events and perfections may be attributed to it or constructed on it. Rather, it is a shell prepared to be split, rent, dissolved. It is a husk, it is froth, it is a form. So think of it like a book. A book, there is paper, there is ink, there are letters. They are all means to express meanings. They are not the authors. They are not what matters. They are not the fundament of any reality. They are all only means to express a meaning. And it is when the whole point of the book is that we are able to read it. Let's say it's not a book, it's a small note. The moment I read it and I get the message, I can throw it away. The paper and the writing in it are not the goal. They are not the purpose. They are the means. And I can throw it away once I get the message. I mean, in this case, just to emphasize that they are there to serve meaning. Matter serves meaning. And it is the embodiment of a meaning, of a desire, of, for instance, a house is an embodiment of a prayer for safety, for well-being, for many kinds of things. It is not itself that reality. It is like the words in the book, the letters in the book. There is a testimony from someone who studied matter all his life, a well-known physicist, Max Planck, if you know physicist. He said, as a man who has devoted his whole life to the most clear-headed science, okay, among physicists think that the most clear-headed science is physics for some reason. So he says, as a man who has devoted his whole life to the most clear-headed science, to the study of matter, I can tell you as a result of my research about atoms, this much. There is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particle of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute solar system of the atom together. we must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. Matter, it's only there because it is being, it can't be itself, it's changing all the time. It is only the sign indicating something else, a conscious and intelligent mind, he says in his own description.
Dr. Yamina,
yes.
Another problem. The scientists, they always think about the mind and everything. And in the Quran, it's the heart, which thinks and which, reasons.
But when we say, again, it's a matter of language, terminology, because when we say the heart, for an English speaker, for the Western mind, let's say, they won't understand what we understand. The heart, al-qalb, has reason, is a function of al-qalb. And that's why some people in translation, when you do translation, you become like, oh, how am I going to translate this? So you will have to have people who have footnotes, and they call it the intellect, but they say this intellect is actually includes the heart. And I have a friend who is fluent in Japanese. And she was saying, the word that is translated as mindfulness, that mind in the mindfulness in the original language represents the heart.
The center of cognition.
Yes. So you see, it's a matter of translation. And so here, even when we say heart, we can be misunderstood. So what he means by mind, what we mean, but more than the words are important only when we're trying to communicate with others. But as far as we are personally concerned, is that experiencing the wholeness, and the heart will be, or the reason and the mind will be working together with the heart in harmony. Whether we can describe how.
It's both.
Yeah, that's another. If it's your subject, then it's for us to solve that problem and find new terms for it, inshallah.
It's very tough. It's very complex.
Yes.
Because you see those people who have transplants, or let's say they have artificial heart, for example, if you take an example of a Muslim, if he gets an artificial heart, he's still going to have Iman. Because
but that's why Fuad doesn't mean the flesh heart. That's why I said inner heart.
Spiritual heart, yes. But the question is this: if he gets artificial heart, not even somebody's heart, but just an artificial heart, so how the Fuad?
I want to finish this. That will be another topic. But the topic there is about physicalism in science is widespread. This is how we learn, all children learn science, as if the brain is itself smart. The brain understands, the heart feels. This is not how it is when we start reading the science, Bismillah. The brain is flesh. It is a means. It is like the matter. This is exactly what we're saying here now, but I don't want to go into the details. Like the book is not, I'm reading the book and I say this book is telling me, teaching me beautiful things. No, this book is written by someone. The author is telling me these things, not the book. So matter is a recipient, something is happening through it, but it is not itself. Does the brain understand? No. If we didn't have, the same, right? I will say only one more sentence about this. Let's say someone, 1 second after someone dies, the brain, the flesh brain is still intact, but there is no life, no consciousness, there's no understanding. So it's like saying, and usually the reasoning is, yes, but without brain, I wouldn't have that. Yes, but without bulb, I wouldn't have electricity. but the bulb does not make electricity. Electricity only goes through the bulb.
Dr. Yamina, at the same time, maybe, and we can maybe explore this later because it's already deep into the night, 10:20 here. But the connection between the physical and the spiritual is a profound one. And as you were sharing the example of the metaphor of the book and writing, so we shouldn't get stuck in the actual ink because the ink is conveying meaning. At the same time, if the ink is changed, there is a question whether the message we are getting is changed. It depends what's changing. Is it just the font changing, right? Even if
all these questions come from the beginning when I said the first point is there is no separation between the physical and the spiritual. There's no between the world and the worldly and the religious, because everything is an ayah, everything is a writing, everything is speech talking about that. So yes, we have to, if we go to the conclusion through the science, then we won't come back with this question. But if we accept it as information, then those questions will keep recurring to us. Anyway, so the solution, I'll just end with this note. The solution is that the vision of everything, being a sign, being an ayah, needs to be integrated into our worldview. And if we are making science, it will be integrated into science. And the study of the cosmos, whether as a scientist or as a human being interacting with the world, but in a systematic way, in an organic way, not in a taqlidi way, in a claiming way, which we do a lot. We need to start making that tahqiq, that the process of confirming and reevaluating what we claim. Otherwise, it's easy to drift away and study. For instance, if we are Muslim and scientists, we study the universe just like any unbeliever would do. And if we are, let's say, very religious, we start Bismillah, we end Alhamdulillah, in between, no connection. This kind of approach is not organic. This kind of ad hoc, approach is not what we want. That kind of science doesn't increase Iman. Often it's going to do just the opposite, actually. Take us away and more away from God. And it doesn't have to be science. It could be interacting with the world on a daily basis. So the more, if we don't interact with the world and read it in the name of our Rabb, then it's going to lead to the separation, the divorce between belief and science and the world, our interaction with the world. And so our belief is just a claim, and our true interaction with the world has nothing to do with God, because we don't do the reading, we don't live, we don't interact with things in the name of our Rabb. So again, the important thing is to read everything. The reading includes feelings, interacting, because when we feel, we are also giving a meaning. So that giving meaning to things has to be done consciously, mindfully, heartfully, in the name of our Rabb, intentionally, purposely, in the name of our Rabb who creates, inshallah. Do you want to add anything, Isra? Sorry, I just wanted to finish because
yeah, I think maybe another time, because
maybe you can note it so we can start with it. You can start with it next time, inshallah.
Maybe I note it down. Yeah, inshallah.
اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وارنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. آمين. والحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.
Ameen. Jazakumullah khair. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. And inshallah, we'll meet next week. And we'll keep each other in dua in the meantime. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala.
Alaikum assalam. Wa alaikum.